The massive crystal displays in the Meridian High Council chamber flickered with thousands of red warning signals. Elder Gray, the head of the Meridian people, stared at the devastating reports with his 4 eyes blinking rapidly in distress. Their colony worlds were falling one by one to the relentless swarm attacks. Half of their territory was already lost. "We have lost contact with the Lotus system," announced First Speaker Tom, his silver skin dulling with worry. "That makes it the 4th system this month." The council chamber erupted in fearful whispers. The Lotus system had been one of their strongest military outposts. If it had fallen, their situation was even worse than they had imagined. "Show me the latest intelligence reports," Elder Gray commanded, his voice carrying the weight of a civilization on the brink of extinction. The displays changed to show vast clouds of biological ships, each one carrying millions of the insect-like swarm. Their weapons were unlike anything the Meridians had ever faced, living weapons that adapted and evolved during battle, becoming stronger with each engagement. "We cannot win this war alone," Elder Gray admitted, his shoulders slumping. "We need help." First Speaker Tom stepped forward, holding a data crystal. "My lord, our deep space monitoring stations have picked up something interesting. We've detected transmissions from a previously unknown civilization." The displays changed again, showing a small spiral arm of the galaxy. "They call themselves humans, and they inhabit this region of space. They're relatively new to interstellar travel, having achieved it only 3 centuries ago." Elder Gray waved one of his hands dismissively. "What good would such a young race be against the swarm? We have been traveling the stars for millennia." "My lord," Tom's voice carried an unusual note of excitement, "you need to see this." The displays now showed various battles and conflicts. The council watched in stunned silence as these humans fought off not 1, but 3 different alien invasions. Their tactics were unusual, their technologies diverse, and their strategies unpredictable. "How is this possible?" asked another council member. "They've defeated 3 separate invasion attempts." Tom nodded eagerly. "Yes, and each time they were supposedly outmatched. The most interesting part is how they won each war differently. They never used the same strategy twice." Elder Gray leaned forward, his interest finally caught. "Tell me more." "The first invasion, they won through what they call guerrilla warfare. The second, through biological warfare. The third, they simply outproduced their enemies in ships and weapons. They're incredibly adaptable." The council chamber grew quiet as everyone processed this information. Here was a young race that had not only survived but thrived against overwhelming odds. Perhaps they could help. "Can we contact them?" Elder Gray asked. Tom pressed a few controls, and a new image appeared. A map showing the distance between Meridian and human space. "We can reach their territory in 3 days at maximum speed. They have something called the United Earth Federation that handles their diplomatic relations." Elder Gray stood up, his decision made. "Prepare our fastest ship. We will send a delegation immediately. Draft a message explaining our situation." "Already done, my lord," Tom said, displaying the message he had prepared. "To the United Earth Federation. We are the Meridian people, and we face extinction. Our worlds burn. Our people die. We have watched your victories against impossible odds, and we humbly request your aid against an enemy that threatens to devour our entire civilization. We offer any payment you require. We only ask that you help us survive." With desperate hope. The Meridian High Council. Elder Gray read the message twice before nodding. "Send it, and prepare our most detailed military reports. If they agree to help, they'll need to know exactly what they're facing." As the message was transmitted across the vast distance of space, the council chamber fell silent again. They had faced the swarm for 3 years, lost countless lives, and seen half their worlds fall. Now their hopes rested on a young race that had somehow defeated every enemy they had faced. They could only wait and hope that humans were as remarkable as their history suggested. Admiral James Miller walked through the gleaming halls of Earth's Central Command, his footsteps echoing against the metal floors. The emergency meeting of the War Council wasn't scheduled for another 10 minutes, but he always arrived early, especially for something this important. The meeting room doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the circular chamber was already filling with military leaders from across human space. On the main display, the Meridian distress signal played on repeat. "Quite a situation we have here," said General Robert Banks, nodding to Miller as he took his seat. "First contact with a new species, and they're already asking for military aid." "Have you seen the data package they sent?" Miller asked, pulling up the holographic displays at his station. "The swarm makes our previous enemies look like amateurs." The room filled quickly as more officers arrived. Once everyone was seated, Fleet Admiral Wilson stood up. His weathered face showed the experience of someone who had fought in 2 of Earth's previous wars. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wilson began, "we've all reviewed the Meridian data. They're losing their war against an enemy that evolves during battle. Traditional tactics have failed them. The question isn't whether we help. Earth has never turned away a civilization facing extinction. The question is how we help." The room's displays changed to show detailed analyses of the swarm's biological ships and weapons. Charts and graphs highlighted their rapid evolution rates and adaptation capabilities. "Their biological weapons adapt to whatever fights them," explained Dr. Emma Porter, head of military sciences. "Modern shields. They develop penetrating enzymes, energy weapons. They grow reflective armor. Eye-targeting systems. They released viruses that infect our computer networks." General Banks leaned forward. "So what you're saying is that our most advanced ships would be at the greatest risk?" "Exactly," Dr. Porter nodded. "The more sophisticated the technology, the more vectors the swarm has to attack and adapt to it." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Then Admiral Miller started laughing. "Something funny, James?" Wilson asked. "Actually, yes," Miller said, standing up. "We're looking at this all wrong. Everyone's thinking about how our best ships would fare. But what about our oldest ships?" He pressed a few buttons, and the display changed to show the 7th Fleet. 30-year-old ships, considered obsolete by modern standards. Ships that were scheduled to be decommissioned next year. The 7th Fleet still runs on nuclear power instead of quantum drives. They use mechanical targeting systems instead of AI. Their hulls are simple titanium alloy instead of adaptive armor. They're practically antiques. Dr. Porter's eyes widened as she understood. They're too simple to be affected by biological weapons. The swarm wouldn't know how to adapt to them because they're not what anyone would expect to face in modern space combat. "Exactly," Miller grinned. "Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy isn't prepared for." Fleet Admiral Wilson stroked his chin thoughtfully. "The 7th Fleet has been running war games for the past 5 years. They've consistently scored higher than expected because newer ships don't know how to counter their old-school tactics." "And who commands the 7th Fleet?" asked General Banks. "Admiral Jack Thompson," Miller replied. "Old school himself, loves using unexpected tactics. His crews train with minimal computer assistance, just in case of electronic warfare." Wilson stood up again. "All in favor of sending the 7th Fleet to assist the Meridians." The vote was unanimous. "Very well," Wilson said. "Dr. Porter, prepare a full briefing on the swarm's capabilities for Admiral Thompson. General Banks, get the 7th Fleet ready for immediate deployment. They'll need extra ammunition, lots of it. Can't rely on energy weapons against biological targets." As the meeting ended, Miller couldn't help but smile. The Meridians had probably expected Earth's most advanced ships to come to their rescue. Instead, they were getting something better. Ships so old that they were new again, commanded by a man who specialized in impossible victories. The swarm was about to learn a very important lesson about humanity. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the newest or most advanced. Sometimes it's the one you never saw coming. The Meridian Welcoming Committee stood in their grand space dock, watching with growing confusion as the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Elder Gray and first speaker Tom exchanged worried glances as they counted the ships. "Only 30 vessels," Tom whispered, "and they look old." The human ships were indeed a stark contrast to the sleek Meridian vessels around them. Their hulls were marked with visible repair patches, and their design seemed almost primitive compared to modern standards. No smooth energy fields surrounded them, no quantum signatures pulsed from their engines, just simple metal and nuclear power. The lead ship, named Thunderchild, established communication. "This is Admiral Jack Thompson of the United Earth Federation 7th Fleet. Permission to dock and meet in person." "Granted," Elder Gray replied, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. "We await your arrival, Admiral." 20 minutes later, Admiral Thompson walked through the airlock. He was an older human with gray hair and weathered features, wearing a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations. Behind him came his senior staff, all veterans who looked like they had seen their fair share of battles. "Welcome to Meridian Prime," Elder Gray said formally. "We expected a larger response force." Thompson smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Sometimes the size of the fleet matters less than its capabilities, Elder. We reviewed your data about the swarm. The 7th Fleet was specifically chosen for this mission." Before Elder Gray could respond, the emergency alarms began blaring. Tom rushed to a nearby console, his silver skin paling to white. "Swarm vessels detected in the Crimson system. They're attacking our mining colonies. How long until they reach the main settlements?" Elder Gray demanded. 2 hours at most. Our defensive fleet is already engaged, but they're being overwhelmed." Admiral Thompson stepped forward, suddenly alert. "How far is the Crimson system from here?" 40 minutes at maximum speed, Tom replied. "Perfect." Thompson activated his communicator. "All ships of the 7th Fleet, battle stations. We're about to show our hosts what these old birds can do." The Meridians watched in alarm as the human fleet moved out, their nuclear engines flaring with simple but reliable power. They seemed so vulnerable, so outdated compared to the biological horrors they were about to face. "You can observe from our command center," Thompson offered. "You might want to see this." In the Meridian Command Center, the battle displays showed the grim situation. 3 massive swarm-high ships were tearing through the Meridian defense fleet, their biological weapons evolving with each engagement. The Meridian ships' energy shields were being dissolved by acid, their quantum computers infected by viral attacks. Then the 7th Fleet arrived. "All ships, combat spread Delta," Thompson ordered calmly. "Remember your training. No fancy stuff. Basic weapons only. Show them what Earth's old guard can do." The Meridians watched in astonishment as the human ships moved with perfect coordination. Instead of advanced energy weapons, they fired simple metal projectiles. Tungsten rods accelerated to near-light speed. The swarm's biological armor, designed to adapt to energy weapons, was ripped apart. "They can't adapt to kinetic impacts," Tom realized, watching the battle unfold. "Their biological defenses are useless against such simple weapons." When the swarm launched their viral attacks, they found no complex computers to infect. When they tried to dissolve the ship's hulls, their acid splashed harmlessly off thick metal plating. When they attempted to predict battle patterns using their hive mind, they found humans using tactics so old they seemed new again. "Forward batteries, fire," Thompson's voice carried through the command center. The human ships launched what looked like massive shotgun blasts into space, clouds of small metal particles that shredded the swarm's smaller ships. In less than an hour, the battle was over. The swarm retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of their ships. The human fleet had suffered only minor damage. Elder Gray turned to Admiral Thompson, his 4 eyes wide with newfound respect. "Now I understand. You didn't send us your weakest fleet at all." Thompson smiled. "No, Elder. We sent you exactly what you needed. a fleet the swarm couldn't adapt to because they've never seen anything like it. Sometimes the best way to fight the future is with the past. For the first time in years, hope began to spread through the Meridian Command Center. Perhaps these humans and their obsolete ships were exactly what they needed to survive. The aftermath of the battle in the Crimson system spread quickly through Meridian space. Admiral Thompson stood in the tactical room of the Thunderchild, surrounded by both human and Meridian officers, explaining the success of their first engagement. "Your ships are fascinating," said Tom, running his silver hand along the old-style tactical table with its physical buttons and mechanical displays. "But surely you have better ones." "Better is a matter of perspective," Thompson replied, pressing a button that showed a hologram of the swarm's biological ships. "Let me show you why these old ships are perfect for this war." He walked around the table, pointing to different parts of his fleet's design. The Meridian officers leaned in, their initial doubt replaced by genuine curiosity. "First, look at our engines," Thompson began. "Simple nuclear fusion. No quantum fields, no exotic matter. The swarm's biological weapons are designed to disrupt advanced power systems, but they can't do anything against good old-fashioned nuclear reactions." A young Meridian officer raised his hand. "But what about speed? Surely you're at a disadvantage." Thompson grinned. "Sometimes being a little slower lets you aim better. Watch this recording." The hologram showed a swarm ship trying to predict the movement patterns of the human fleet. The biological vessel kept anticipating complex evasive maneuvers, but the human ships moved in simple, straightforward patterns, throwing off the swarm's predictions completely. "We don't zigzag through quantum states or jump through subspace pockets," Thompson explained. "We just move like ships have moved for centuries." The swarm's tactical computers can't handle such basic strategies. They're too used to dealing with advanced algorithms. Tom walked closer to examine the weapons display. "And these projectile weapons? They seem so primitive." "Primitive but effective," said Lieutenant Mary Reed, the fleet's weapons officer. She pulled up a detailed scan of their main guns. No energy signatures to adapt to, no complex targeting systems to hack. Just good old-fashioned tungsten rods accelerated to near-light speed. Physics is physics. You can't evolve armor against that kind of kinetic impact. The tactical room's doors opened as Dr. Bill Harris, the fleet's chief engineer, entered with a damaged piece of hull plating from a swarm ship. "Look at this," he said, placing it on the table. "Their biological armor is amazing stuff. It can adapt to energy weapons, generate countermeasures against lasers, even absorb plasma shots, but hit it with a simple metal slug." He poked his finger through the clean hole in the plate. "Nature never evolved a defense against hypersonic tungsten rods." Thompson moved to another display, showing their communication systems. "Even our comm gear is deliberately basic. No quantum entanglement, no AI processors, just radio waves and human operators using manual encoding. The swarm's viral attacks can't infect equipment that's too simple to be infected." One of the Meridian officers shook his head in amazement. "You've turned your technological disadvantage into an advantage." "Exactly," Thompson smiled. "Every piece of technology on these ships was chosen because it's too basic for the swarm to counter. Our targeting computers use old-style ballistic calculations. Our armor is just layers of titanium and ceramic. Our repair systems are handled by human engineers with wrenches, not nanobots." The room fell silent as the Meridians processed this information. Their entire civilization had been built on the principle that newer technology was always better. Now these humans were proving that sometimes the opposite was true. "There's an old saying on Earth," Thompson said, looking at the star map showing swarm territory. "Sometimes the best move in a game isn't the most advanced one. It's the one your opponent never expects." The swarm expects to face cutting-edge technology because that's what everyone uses. Instead, they're facing ships so old-fashioned that all their evolutionary advantages are useless. Dr. Harris picked up the damaged swarm armor again. "They can evolve all they want, but they can't change the basic laws of physics. And that's what these old ships run on. Just simple, reliable physics. As if to emphasize his point, the Thunderchild's nuclear engines hummed steadily in the background, their reliable rhythm a reminder that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. 2 months after the arrival of the 7th Fleet, the war room aboard Thunderchild was alive with activity. Admiral Thompson stood before a holographic map showing recent battles, marking each human victory with a steady green light. There were many green lights. The swarm is retreating from the DART system, Lieutenant Reed announced, adding another green marker to the map. That's their 5th retreat this week. Thompson nodded, studying the pattern of the swarm's movements. The biological ships were pulling back, but not in random directions. They were gathering somewhere. They're learning, he said, pointing to a cluster of red dots at the edge of Meridian space. But they're learning the wrong lessons. Elder Gray, who now spent most of his time aboard Thunderchild, moved closer to the map. What do you mean, Admiral? Look at their new formations, Thompson explained. They're developing thicker armor, trying to withstand our kinetic weapons, making themselves heavier, slower. He smiled, which is exactly what we wanted them to do. The door slid open as Dr. Harris walked in, carrying what looked like an ancient chemical warhead. The modified weapons are ready, sir, just like the ones from the Earth-Krell War, but with a few improvements. The Meridians in the room stared at the weapon with confusion. It had no energy signature, no advanced guidance systems, just a metal shell filled with chemicals. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Thompson said, noticing their looks. The swarm adapts to survive any weapon used against them, but they've never faced chemical weapons from 3 centuries ago. Their biological systems have no defense against them. Lieutenant Reed pulled up a new tactical display. The swarm ships are now 40% larger than when we first encountered them. Their armor is incredibly dense, designed to withstand our kinetic rounds, which makes them perfect targets for Operation Throwback, Thompson said. All ships, battle stations, we're launching in 10 minutes. The 7th Fleet moved through space in an old-fashioned line formation. The swarm ships, now massive and heavily armored, moved to meet them. Their new thick biological armor gleamed, ready to withstand the expected barrage of tungsten rods. All ships hold kinetic weapons, Thompson ordered. Launch chemical payloads on my mark. The swarm ships drew closer, their tactical computers predicting another round of kinetic impacts. Instead, the human fleet launched clouds of what looked like primitive missiles. Chemical dispersal in 3, 2, 1. The missiles didn't explode with force. Instead, they burst into clouds of green gas. The swarm's thick armor, designed to stop physical impacts, did nothing to prevent the gas from seeping through their biological systems. The compound attacks their silicon-based nervous systems, Dr. Harris explained to the watching Meridians. It's based on pesticides Earth used centuries ago. The swarm never developed a defense because no one has used chemical weapons in space for generations. The effect was devastating. The massive swarm ships began to drift, their biological systems shutting down. Their thick armor, evolved to stop kinetic weapons, now worked against them, trapping the deadly chemicals inside their own ships. Now, Thompson ordered, kinetic rounds, full spread. The tungsten rods tore through the disabled ships, finishing what the chemicals had started. In less than an hour, the largest swarm fleet they'd faced had been reduced to drifting debris. I don't understand, Tom said, watching the battle's end. You could have used these weapons from the start. Why wait? Because now they can't adapt, Thompson explained. They spent 2 months evolving thick armor against our kinetic weapons, making themselves perfect targets for chemical attacks. If we'd used chemicals first, they would have developed countermeasures. Sometimes victory isn't about having the best weapons. It's about using the right weapons at the right time. Elder Gray looked at the battle display with newfound understanding. You didn't just bring old ships and weapons. You brought old tactics, old strategies. Things the swarm had never seen before. Exactly, Thompson smiled. The greatest trick we pulled wasn't bringing obsolete technology. It was making the swarm think they knew what they were fighting against. While they were busy adapting to one threat, we were preparing a completely different one. The victory celebrations that night were subdued. Everyone knew the war wasn't over. But for the first time, they could see how it might end. The swarm was learning that sometimes the old ways were the deadliest ways of all. The Grand Assembly Hall of Meridian Prime was packed with military officers from both species. 3 months into the war, what had started as suspicion between humans and Meridians had grown into genuine respect. Today was the first official knowledge exchange session. Admiral Thompson stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by both old and new technology. Behind him, Lieutenant Reed was helping Tom understand the manual targeting systems of their ships. The key to survival isn't having the newest weapons, Thompson began, addressing the gathered crowd. It's understanding all weapons, old and new. The swarm beats advanced civilizations because everyone follows the same path, always upgrading, always advancing, always becoming more predictable. He picked up an old radio transmitter. This device is 300 years old. We still train our communications officers to use it. Do you know why? Elder Gray, sitting in the front row, raised his hand. Because it can't be hacked by biological weapons. Partly, Thompson nodded. But more importantly, because it represents a way of thinking the swarm can't understand. They expect quantum communications, AI protocols, advanced encryption. They've never faced an enemy who sometimes just uses simple radio waves. Dr. Harris stepped forward, carrying pieces of both human and Meridian technology. Look at these engine designs, he said, laying them out. Your quantum drives are more powerful, more efficient. But our nuclear engines, they're reliable. They can't be infected. They can't be shut down by biological weapons. Sometimes the best backup plan is a step backward. The assembly hall screens lit up, showing recordings from various battles. The Meridians watched intently as human ships used tactics from centuries ago, combined with their own modern strategies. We're not suggesting you abandon your advanced technology, Thompson continued. We're suggesting you diversify, keep the old alongside the new. The swarm adapts to defeat whatever they face most often. So don't be predictable. A young Meridian officer stood up. But how do we maintain 2 different types of technology? It seems inefficient. Inefficient? Thompson smiled. Let me tell you about Earth's first alien war. We won because we kept using old satellites even after developing quantum sensors. The enemy hacked our advanced systems, but never thought to look for primitive radar installations. Those inefficient backup systems saved our planet. Lieutenant Reed took over, showing tactical displays of recent battles. The swarm's greatest weakness isn't our weapons, it's their own assumptions. They evolve to counter what they think we'll do next. By keeping both old and new technology, we can always surprise them. The screen showed a particularly successful battle where human ships had used ancient smokescreen tactics, releasing clouds of metal particles that blocked the swarm's biological sensors. The swarm ships, expecting advanced electronic warfare, had been completely blind. Your civilization has incredible technology, Dr. Harris said to the Meridians, but you became dependent on it. Every tool you had was cutting edge, which meant every tool could be adapted to and defeated. That's why the swarm was winning. Elder Gray stood up, addressing his people. The humans aren't teaching us to go backward. They're teaching us to be unpredictable, to keep our enemies guessing, to maintain weapons and tactics from every era, so we can never be fully understood or countered. Thompson nodded approvingly. The swarm's biological adaptations are incredible, but they're also predictable. They evolve to counter the most immediate threat. By keeping diverse capabilities, we can always switch to something they're not prepared for. The assembly hall buzzed with discussion as Meridian officers began to understand. Their society had always pushed forward, always sought the newest and best. But the humans had shown them that true strength came from versatility, from maintaining knowledge and capabilities across all technological levels. Remember, Thompson concluded, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the best weapons. It's the one you can't predict. By keeping the old ways alongside the new, we become impossible to predict. And that's how we'll win this war. As the session ended, Meridian engineers were already discussing plans to restart production of simpler, more robust technologies. They had learned that sometimes the path to the future required a deep understanding of the past. 6 months after the arrival of humanity's 7th Fleet, the massive screens in Meridian High Council Chamber showed a very different map than before. Where there had once been red indicators showing swarm victories, now green lights marked liberated systems. Admiral Thompson stood before the combined fleet commanders, both human and Meridian. The old Thunder Child had earned its share of battle scars, but it still sailed proudly alongside the newest Meridian vessels. The last swarm high ship has retreated beyond the outer rim, Thompson announced. Our long-range sensors show their remaining forces are scattered and disorganized. The war is over. The chamber erupted in cheers. Elder Gray rose from his seat, his 4 eyes bright with emotion. Admiral Thompson, you didn't just save our civilization. You taught us to save ourselves. Thompson walked to a display showing their combined fleet. Old human ships flew in formation with both advanced and newly built simple Meridian vessels. It was a sight that would have seemed strange 6 months ago. The Meridian shipyards are now producing vessels of all types, Tom reported proudly. Simple nuclear-powered ships alongside our quantum vessels. Mechanical backup systems in all our advanced craft. We're even training crews to fight without computer assistance. Just like Earth's defense doctrine. Thompson nodded approvingly. Never put all your trust in one type of technology. Never become too predictable. Dr. Harris, who had been working with Meridian engineers, stepped forward with a holographic display. We've analyzed the swarm's final battles. Their biological adaptation rates dropped by 70% in the last month. They couldn't evolve fast enough to counter our constantly changing tactics. Lieutenant Reeve added her own tactical analysis. Every time they developed a defense against one weapon, we switched to another. When they adapted to our chemical weapons, we used kinetics. When they evolved against kinetics, we used electronic warfare. When they developed viral defenses, we went back to simple radio signals. The swarm's greatest strength was their ability to adapt, Elder Gray said thoughtfully. But we turned it into a weakness. They wasted energy and resources trying to adapt to everything at once. Thompson walked to the center of the chamber. But the real victory isn't just defeating the swarm. It's what your civilization has learned. Show them, Tom. Tom activated a new display, showing the redesigned Meridian Defense Force. We've restructured our entire military. Each system now maintains 3 types of defense fleets: advanced, basic, and hybrid. No enemy will ever find us predictable again. And the best part, Dr. Harris added, is that your simple ships cost 1/10 of what your advanced vessels did. You can maintain a much larger defense force now. Elder Gray turned to address the chamber. When we first called for help, we expected humanity to send their most advanced fleet. Instead, they sent us something far more valuable: wisdom. The understanding that true strength lies not in having the newest weapons, but in being able to fight in any way necessary. Your civilization had grown too predictable, Thompson explained. Everything you did was cutting edge, state-of-the-art. That's why the swarm was beating you. They could focus all their adaptation on one type of technology. But now we're unpredictable, Tom finished. New and old technology working together. Quantum computers alongside mechanical backups. Energy weapons and simple projectiles. Advanced armor and basic steel plates. The chamber's displays showed the new Meridian Defense Doctrine, modeled after Earth's own military philosophy. Maintain capabilities across all technological levels, never become too dependent on any single type of system, and always keep your enemies guessing. As the victory celebration began, Thompson stood with Elder Gray, watching their combined fleet through the chamber's massive windows. "You know," Thompson said, "back on Earth, some people question sending our oldest ships to help you." Elder Gray's silver skin rippled with amusement. "And now they understand what we've always known in the Seventh Fleet. Sometimes the oldest sword is the one your enemy least expects. Your civilization isn't just saved, it's stronger than ever. Because now you know what we know. That the best way to win a war is to be impossible to predict." They finished together, watching as old and new ships patrolled side by side, ready for whatever the galaxy might throw at them next.